Hello, my name is Laura Robson-Mainwaring and I'm the Modern Health Record Specialist at the National Archives. I'm going to talk about the record series MH106, which is a series we hold that contains a representative sample of service personnel medical records from the First World War. I'm going to first give a quick overview of the series, update you on what progress has been made so far to the catalogue enhancement, share some interesting finds, and point to what the future holds for the project. The records in this series are a representative selection of several types of medical records from various theatres of war, and include medical records of servicemen and servicewomen. Having been injured, wounded, or taken sick on the Western Front, British and Commonwealth soldiers would initially receive their medical treatment at a field ambulance unit. From there, they would either be returned to their unit or sent further back to a casualty clearing station for further care. From a casualty clearing station, the injured would be moved back further towards a based hospital before being transported home to a British military or civilian hospital. As well as the battlefield wounds suffered by soldiers, the spread and impact of different ailments and diseases amongst the troops is also made apparent by these records. So, when I say these are a representative sample, I'm referring to the fact that the majority of medical records created during the war for service personnel were later destroyed. The original collection weighed 275 tonnes, but the surviving sample only weighs around 2.5 tonnes, which, calculated by weight, indicates that this is less than 1% of the original collection. Although this is a dramatic reduction, the collection still comprises of 2,389 boxes of records, also known as pieces. Essentially, the record series is made up of three main strands. The first 2,078 pieces of the series are admission and discharge registers from military hospitals and casualty clearing stations, field ambulances, an ambulance train, and a hospital ship. These have all been digitised and are name searchable on Find My Past. The second strand is made up of 306 pieces of medical case sheets and medical cards for individual servicemen and women. The case sheets were selected to illustrate the diversity of diseases contracted, the types of injuries received, and the kinds of treatments prescribed to the war wounded. The series also contains medical cards relating to individuals in selected regiments. So these 306 pieces are what the MH106 cataloguing project as a whole is seeking to provide enhanced catalogue descriptions for. The remaining 5 pieces are reference volumes, which relate to the use of MH106 when they are part of the original collection of medical records, when they were being used by the Ministry of Pensions. This includes registers that would have helped the civil servants search for records when they used them to verify claims for war disability pensions. They also contain information on the provenance and use of the original collection. So just to show you here on Find My Past, you can see they have a collection called British Armed Forces First World War Soldiers Medical Records. So using this interface, you can input a soldier's name or regimental number to search the records. And you can also view the digital images of the admission and discharge registers when you find an entry. So the information these records give can include name, rank, regimental number, age, length of service, details of the sickness or wounds incurred, and the date of admission and transfer. But finding someone's name in the registers does not always give much information. However, it does give researchers some insight into the lived experiences of those on the front lines, whether they were injured and where they were during a specific period of the war. Phase 1 of the project, financed by the Wellcome Trust between 2017 and 2020, saw the cataloguing of 109 boxes of First World War medical sheets and 28 boxes of medical cards, so a total of 137 pieces, resulting in 44,612 individual item descriptions. So as a result of this project, this means that almost 50% of the collection is now fully searchable by name, regimental number, hospital, or illness. So you can see here an example search for a surname within Discovery. So in this case, we get 24 results for the surname Robson. So phase 1 of the project has enabled these 24 entries now be name searchable. However, it is worth bearing in mind when researching that the collection as a whole can still contain other people with that surname, as not everything has been catalogued at item level. If we take a look at one of the discovery entries, we can see what information was captured in discovery as a result of phase 1 of the catalogue enhancement. You can see here that we know that within the piece 2158, we will find the record for Henry Black on folio 8. We can see his rank, the regiment he was in, his service number, his age, the dates of admission and discharge, the hospitals he was treated in, the condition he was admitted for, and you will see in the details and outcome section potentially some more information. So this catalogue entry is from phase 1 of the project. I will show you later how we have altered some of the information we now capture, particularly with regards to this details and outcome section. So just over half the collection are still in their original state. This means that they are only available to speculatively search by hospital or affliction, with a few of the boxes being for specific regiments. So in this way, you're only going to be able to search the collection by the name of the hospital they were treated in, which is information many researchers would not have. So here you can see the records that we have for the 28th General Hospital, and they are catalogued by alphabetical range only. However, phase 2 is now underway of these remaining 169 boxes. This part of the project began in September 2020. One of our project cataloguers from phase 1 was funded by the Friends of the National Archives to continue in their role for another 6 months, to enable us to continue the process of enhancing catalogue descriptions as a volunteer project. So as a result, we now have 3 brilliant volunteers, Peter, Dee and Gareth, working on the project every Monday, and they're pictured here on the right. So the first phase of the second phase of the project is concentrating on the 27 boxes relating to Knapsbury Hospital. So at the moment, they're currently shown in the catalogue in their alphabetical ranges. We have already uploaded letters A, B and C and are currently working on boxes up to the letter I. So we're aiming to complete Knapsbury by mid-2023, leaving 142 boxes left to complete. So a bit of background on Knapsbury. It acted as a general military hospital and received patients suffering with all manner of conditions. But the surviving papers have so far revealed a tendency towards more detailed documentation when a case involves a patient suffering with mental health conditions, compared to those admitted for other disorders. And this is perhaps not surprising, given that Knapsbury originally was the Middlesex County Asylum, and subsequently after the war it reverted to being a mental health facility. One such example of a patient suffering from shell shock was featured in the last series of BBC's Who Do You Think You Are? Stood in the former grounds of Knapsbury Hospital, David Williams was shown a facsimile copy of a case sheet after learning about the traumatic experience of Private John George Borman, his great-grandfather, during the First World War. The record provides details of Borman's admissions to various hospitals between June 1915 and July 1919 for treatment for shell shock, and includes written assessment of his mental state. Upon arrival to Knapsbury in August 1918, Borman was said to talk quite freely about the voices of men talking to him and persecuting him for the past 6 months. By November, as the hallucinations of hearing persisted, it was observed that he talks to himself in quiet corners. He appeared to remain unstable into 1919, but was ultimately discharged and sent home in July of that year. So, as part of phase 2, there has been some changes to some of the information captured from the records to include in the catalogue due to the significant change to resources. Essentially, we have just streamlined the information recorded in the details and outcome section and renamed this outcome and documents included. So you can see examples, an example of this section from phase 1 at the top of the slide. In phase 2, we now no longer repeat the information about why the patient was admitted, as this is already captured in the condition and injury and disease section. We are now not referring to treatment or where the disease or injury was contracted, as we wanted to bear in mind that the aim of the catalogue enhancement is to be a finding aid and not a transcription of the record itself. The phrase "further details given" was also felt to be self-evident and not required. The information now captured is more than sufficient to continue to open up the files to researchers, the most important being that they are searchable by name or service number. Researchers can also continue to search the records by condition or disease, continuing their use for those interested in the medical side of the records. We have also still included the outcome. So, if a service personnel sadly died, for example, then this is still captured in the catalogue description, and it gives us a bit more insight into the human cost of the war. So these changes have removed repetition and subjectivity about what was deemed important to include with reference to treatment. And importantly, the changes have increased the output threefold without seriously detracting from what a user can ascertain about the record from the discovery entry. And this will enable us to complete the cataloguing of this series much sooner. So what information is captured in the record itself? So you can see that the record can include more information than is found in the catalogue description, including length of service, religion and denomination, and further information about the treatment or how the wound or illness was incurred. The records may also include extra sheets relating to the treatment and care of the patients, including clinical charts, X-ray reports, and diagrams of the wounds, amongst other papers. So what is the research potential for these records? Ultimately, they gave us insight into the anguish and suffering of those who fought in the First World War. Trench warfare brought with it new types of injuries and untold suffering, and few personnel would have lived through the war unscathed. Conditions such as trench foot, mustard gas poisoning, shell and gun wounds, shell shock, broken bones, tonsillitis, ingrown toenails, lice, influenza, malaria and scabies are just some of the common ailments and afflictions that those living and fighting on the front lines faced. So this example on the right is the medical case sheet of gunner Neil MacDonald. It explains that a bullet entered his chest and became embedded in his heart muscle, and you'll see here that there is also a detailed diagram of the affliction. A note next to the diagram graphically remarks that the bullet moves with each heartbeat. His record includes 4 medical case sheets, 8 clinical charts, and 3 lab reports, which really highlight his experience of receiving a war wound. Thankfully, MacDonald recovered and was discharged 10 months after he was admitted. These records offer the opportunity for people to uncover their ancestors' movements during the war, as well as their lived experience, which has, for the majority of soldiers, remained undocumented. The records also offer opportunities for researchers to develop understanding both on the medical history of the war and its social and cultural aftermath, particularly with regards to mental health or disabilities and afflictions that would have impacted service personnel long after the war had ended. And previously, these records were extremely difficult to navigate. You needed to know which hospital the person was in before a speculative search could have been undertaken within an alphabetical range. As a result of these catalogue enhancements, more researchers will be able to locate and examine cases. The detailed accounts of the afflictions will provide researchers with a clearer picture of the medical and lived experience of a significant number of ordinary servicemen and women during wartime. MH106 contains Private Edwin Rutledge's medical case sheet, which includes a watercolour painting of his foot afflicted with gangrene. Trench foot was a common condition, suffered particularly by soldiers serving in cold, wet, and unsanitary conditions. Left untreated, trench foot could be serious, leading to gangrene and amputation. Sadly, this patient underwent amputation of part of his second toe. We also have the medical case sheet of Driver Wood. Records show that accidental injuries, often involving firearms, machinery, horses, or vehicles, were fairly frequent. In Wood's case, it shows that even playing football could be hazardous. Accidental injuries such as this were subject to scrutiny by the authorities. In Driver Wood's case, fellow soldiers provided witness statements to confirm that his injury was a genuine accident and had not been self-inflicted. There are many more thousands of stories to be uncovered in this collection. If you'd like to find out more about the records or read about some of the stories already uncovered, then please take a look at some of the blogs on our website. Thank you for listening.